Hi, everybody, and welcome back to HSP TV channel. I am your host, Barbara, and today I'm joined by the wonderful Loralee Humphreys. And today we are going to be talking about how to get beyond the challenges of life so you can be your true self. And I've been looking forward to this talk, Loralee, because this is, I think, the major pain point that people are struggling with, especially now with everything changing. And I
Mhm.
know that a lot of the people in my community are struggling with the challenges of life and have no idea on how to move beyond them. So I think this is going to be an amazing talk, and I'm feeling very grateful that you're here talking to me about this.
Oh, this is an exciting topic and very relevant. I agree. So thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Right? Are you also seeing it in your environment that people are really struggling with, well, let's call them the challenges of life?
Oh, absolutely. And it's just ramped up, gotten more intense and more varied over the last few years. And yeah, I think people are they're, I think they're starting to reach the end of their string to
Yes.
where so much is hitting them all at once and they're like, what to do. And so I think that's the point where either people push through something, they have a breakthrough, or they kind of pull back and then just kind of implode on themselves. So it's a tight spot that everybody is in. Yeah,
Yes, it can feel like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and
absolutely.
there's no right way to go anymore. And I've seen it drive people to addictions, booze
Yeah.
addiction, drug addiction, sex addiction, food addiction, shopping addiction,
Hmm.
to numb
Phones. Yeah.
everything, right? To not have
Yeah.
to feel so much.
Yeah.
And then there are the people who are good of mind, good of heart, good of intention, and they really want to move beyond it. But it just seems like more and more shit is just piling on
Yeah.
and they're drowning.
Yeah. 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 Then it's like, what do you do? How do you tread water?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And I don't know how it is for you, but I remember this period. I've gone through this period and I was fighting for all I was worth and I was trying everything and I asked for help. I did lots and lots of healing.
Yeah.
I went to mentors, I tried courses, books, you name it. I tried it and it seemed that no matter what I was doing, it didn't really make a difference. And it was just one hardship after another,
Mhm.
sometimes multiple at the same time. And
Right. Yeah.
eventually I just reached the point where I thought, I cannot do this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate because I've had periods of my life where I've been like that too. And yeah, it's not a comfortable place by any means. And yet having made it through with all the work and all the things, I can understand, from my vantage point now, I can understand why we go through things like that, what it takes to get through that, and the gifts on the other side, which are profound. And
Yes,
that's what, as the title says, leads you to being your true self. So
exactly.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot.
I definitely also want to go into the benefits at the end of the tunnel
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
emerge.
yeah.
I often either compare it to being a butterfly. So
Mhm.
you're first a caterpillar and then you go into
Yes,
your cocoon. And then as a butterfly, you need to emerge from it. And this is a
yes,
struggle and it's
yes.
difficult and it's painful, but you need to go through that phase to get the
Absolutely.
strong wings that are able to carry your body when you go through life as a butterfly.
Yeah.
That's one analogy. And the other one could be the analogy of the phoenix, where you
Hmm.
completely burn to ash, and then from the ash, you arise anew. And so
Yeah.
maybe it's a good idea to first start talking about this phase where everything seems to come crashing down and where you feel the weight of it all and also the sheer exhaustion of it. Many people don't have anybody to talk about these things with and they feel very alone and desperate and they don't
Mhm.
know what to do.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that has helped me is learning the cycle called the hero's journey. I think Carl Jung coined that phrase, and he looked at the different phases or stages of crash, healing, transformation, and then going out into the world again. And that's kind of parallel to what you're talking about with that process of the butterfly. And so I think yeah, I would say that people are in the stage where they are having to go into the cocoon. So like the caterpillar stage, the larva stage is you're going around doing your thing. Life is all good. You're kind of oblivious to many things. You just haven't been taught or educated, or you haven't experienced those things. It's the naivete, the innocence. And like in the tarot cards, it could be also considered the fool, where you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
And uh, like in today's condition of the world, there's so many structures. Every single structure that we have been living within that has defined and controlled society is now crumbling and breaking down. And heretofore, we have looked at those structures of society, like the government, the education system, big pharma, the medical system, finance, all these things, to be like big daddy or big mommy to take care of us. Hence, in a caterpillar, there's ample amounts of food running as they crawl around the leaf. You don't have to be aware and responsible for so many nuances of life.
No.
And so I think what we're going through as a collective, as a planetary collective of humanity, is this process of going into the cocoon to mature spiritually and emotionally. And everyone has their unique experience and way that they're going to go through this. And it's dependent upon what their soul on the soul level has decided they need in order to evolve on and to discover our true potential of humanity. And so, yeah, we are definitely being pushed into a cocoon to where you can either implode or you can evolve. And it's a very what makes it so jarring is because it seems to come out of the blue, like out of nowhere. It's like all of a sudden all these things, and then you find yourself drowning. It's like, how did I get to here? How did it happen? And I remember when I went through my first big awakening, I was in college, and I had this intuitive sense that things were about to change. And it was frightening, terrifying to me, because I didn't know what was going to happen. But I remember I was in my apartment, and the way it was situated was the toilet had its own little closet. And then just outside of that was like a hallway type area where the sinks and the mirrors and the cupboards were, where my roommates and I would, get ready for the day and etc. So I remember I was standing there looking in the mirror, and I had this image in my mind, which I will never forget. And it was just so it just hit me. I saw myself in the air falling towards the ground. I couldn't stop myself. And below me was this concrete slab.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I was going to hit it and just splat across it. And so that was the intuitive premonition. It's like life is about to change for you.
Mm-hmm.
And still just remembering that memory, I can remember how frightening that feels. The
Mm-hmm.
terror of like, oh my God, am I going to make it through? What do I do? How do I do? All the things that the mind will spin out on. And just
Yeah.
the feeling frozen in fear of what's going to happen to me. Am I going to be okay?
Yeah, not only
And
you, but also the ones depending on you.
yeah, and I think that is the point where so many people are. They see the slab and they see the inevitable, and it terrifies them.
Mm-hmm.
And
And what I've seen is also that there are a variety of ways in which it can look. So for
yeah,
some people, it's exactly as how you described. I also know that there are people who are already in the larvae state,
mhm,
experiencing lots of trials and errors and
yeah,
hardship, but they're still oblivious to the spiritual thing, 3D,
right,
5D, Dark Night of the Soul, all of these things they've never
yeah,
heard about. But life can be a struggle already in the larva stage.
yeah,
There are also people who sort of see it coming. It's not all of
mhm,
a sudden there. They can sort of seeing it going the wrong way, or
yeah.
intuitively they feel like, oh, this is something I need to do something, or but they don't know what.
What? Uh-huh.
And so all of these forms are possible for people.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this, I would love it if you could leave a comment with which one you identify the most with. But then indeed, when you're in that free fall, in some call it the dark night of the soul, others call it a psychosis. And it can be terrifying because
Mhm.
you have no idea what to do. You have
Mhm.
no idea what is going to happen. Usually, you're also not by yourself. You're responsible, maybe for your spouse or your children or
Yeah.
pets or something. And yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah. And it's one of the things, and a lot of things I share now is like having been through it on the other side, so I can give like experience and perspective. But one of the things that I think really helps is to understand, like the archetypal pattern. Like, for example, the pattern of the hero's journey. Just
Mhm.
really, for people who are like, what's happening? I would encourage them, it's like, look that up and really study and read about and sit with the various stages of the hero's journey, because it's not only planetary, big, huge, archetypal, impersonal, it's also extremely intimate and personal at the same time. So what I find helps is when I can understand the big pattern of, for example, the archetype's journey, then I can look at my own experience and say, oh, this is where I am at in this cycle. And so that can help calm the mind and the emotions a little bit. And then knowing what the next phase of the experience of the cycle is, then you can say, oh, okay, eventually this particular phase is going to end and I'm going to enter into that next phase. And
Yes,
so that helps so that
yes.
it's not such this major freak out of the complete unknown.
Yeah, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also just recognizing we are in this together. And I think that's one of the big, huge lessons for all of humanity is to stop the division and the fighting. Oh, that's
Mhm.
huge. We will not come through this by ourselves. This
No,
whole metamorphosis and all these changes that are upon us that humanity is barreling into, the
hmm
way we get through this is by coming together and learning to trust and communicate and depend on one another in ways I don't think we've ever had to for not for a very, very long time.
No, and it also really depends in which phase you are, because there are the
Mhm.
people who are the
Yeah,
front runners, right? Who are
yeah,
supposed to help the rest when they're in this phase. And what that could look like is that you're going through stuff that nobody in your environment can even have an inkling of imagination of. So they
yeah.
cannot relate. You cannot talk to them. If you try to talk to them, they look at you like you've lost your mind. And then it's
Mhm.
really important to find communities like my solutions community, for instance, where you can
Yeah,
talk to people who are going through something similar, who are
yeah.
on a similar journey, and where you can just share what's going on with you, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what is happening. Maybe even get some advice or some tips from people who
Mhm.
are a little bit further ahead and already have gone through it, or just, even listening to other people going through similar things and listening to their story can already be like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I'm not losing my mind. I'm not going crazy. I'm not the only one. Oh, this is such a relief that I can share it
Mhm.
with people.
Yeah, that's a big, big piece. And but when I was going through a lot of my challenges, that was a huge piece. And it was a time before the internet, and there wasn't a lot of people around. So when I
No.
did find one or two people, I'm like, oh my goodness, I can talk to you.
Yes.
So it's like cherishing those people, and it's I think one of the challenges that a lot of people are experiencing is what you were mentioning before of such the deep division. People have become so polarized in their ideologies, and in some levels, you just simply cannot talk to those people anymore. There's become such a chasm, and I can get into the intricacies of how that happened, which I find rather fascinating.
Hmm.
But just looking at how quickly people have become so deeply divided that it makes communication very difficult.
Yes.
And I think one of the things about that whole dynamic is it's a spiritual lesson, a spiritual journey of initiation of of letting go, of honoring the person, of what they provided to you, what they gave you, honoring the good times, honoring the gifts, and knowing when to say no. It's like you can, and I've watched friends do this with their family members. It's so heartbreaking for them, of the divide within families and siblings,
Yeah.
trying to
I'm
communicate. And at some point, it's recognizing neither of you are going to move. You're very convicted in your feelings and beliefs, for, good or bad, that doesn't matter. It's just the fact that that's where you're at.
mhm.
And just learning to be okay with that and accept them for their choices and accept you for your choices, and honor the path of evolution, of that's what they have chosen within themselves on a soul spiritual level, maybe, maybe not.
Yes.
And they will have their evolutionary experience, as do we. And so it's the pain of the separation, and it's the honoring of, look at what they did provide, and allowing with grace and love to go your separate ways.
Yeah.
And knowing that you can, that there's other people who are now at your frequency. And again, it goes back to spiritual development, who
Mhm.
resonate with you and your mind, your consciousness, your goals and intentions of, we choose to grow in this direction and evolve and create in this manner. Other people choose to do it their way, and it's all okay.
Yes. Yes, I love what you're sharing because it's spot on. And in light of that, something that really helped me is learning that not everybody is meant to walk your entire path for the entire length that your path is long. And some
Absolutely.
people come, some people go. Some people come because you need to learn a specific lesson. Other people come because you need a friend or an ally
Yeah.
in a certain situation. And then when you don't need each other anymore, your paths go their separate way.
Mhm.
Sometimes you meet someone and you have a beautiful story together for a specific time that really helped
Mhm.
heal certain parts, and then
Yeah.
you are ready to grow, and that person isn't ready for the same growth, and then you go your separate ways. And I am separated from most of my family because I am the black sheep of the family, and they just couldn't understand me and my journey. And it was a very difficult decision to
Mhm.
decide, for now I need to take a separation or a distance, because
Yeah.
it wasn't mutually beneficial, quite the opposite. And you can definitely honor the greatness of the person in your life, the things that they've brought you, the beauty of your connection.
Mhm.
And you can also miss that person or that beauty or that connection when they go out of your life. All of that is completely okay, but it's something that we need to accept, while too many of us try to control and to hang on.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, similarly to you, my early experience that I was alluding to, that led me to becoming, quote, the black sheep, or just going out on my own and living a very different life from my family. And so I understand how that feels. I understand how difficult it is to make that choice, knowing that you're going to be pretty much on your own. And
Yes.
that to me is also part of, like, the hero's journey, getting back to that like a soul spiritual initiatory process. Because for me, in my experience, what that gave me was a very solid sense of self,
Mm-hmm.
to rely on myself, to trust myself, my intuition, to know myself. And at the end of the day, I think that's one of the biggest lessons all of this is about,
Mm-hmm.
is allowing relationships to come and go, because you have such a developed sense of who you are. It doesn't, it's not that it makes it easier, but you can understand the coming and the going and the letting go, because it's
Yes.
not, because your, not only identity, but you don't have so much invested in that relationship that you would be lost without it.
You're not dependent on anybody else. So
Yeah,
I recognize what you're saying, and we've moved into the benefits of overcoming these challenges and what it
yeah,
bring you when you become your true self. And I, like you, have discovered everything that I'm worth, everything
yeah,
that I can do, everything that I am, and I've discovered how wonderful that is, and I've discovered that I don't need other people to be happy, to earn enough
mhm,
money, to have a fulfilling life. I want people in my life, the right types of people. And when they are not there, then that is also okay because I
yeah,
am happy with my own company. I like
yeah,
being by myself and I know what I well, yeah, I get back to the same thing. What I'm worth,
yeah,
what my value is, what I can do, what I can bring. I don't have to second guess. I don't have to doubt. But I've
mhm,
also stopped caring about other people's opinions. So it's not that I
yeah,
don't care about other people. I care a lot about the people that matter to me. But when people call me a bitch, then I just heard a definition that I love. So bitch is babe in total control of herself.
yeah.
And that's
That's
like
good.
yes, right?
Yeah.
So people have called me bitch, they've called me rude, they've called me names that I will not repeat here in this show
Uh-huh.
today. And from their perspective, where they are still stuck, I understand, but
Yeah,
it's no longer crippling me or making me feel less than or things like that. That's what I mean with I've stopped caring.
yeah. And I think that is the spiritual initiation. That is the lesson of moving into that space. Because I think that so many people they have such a hard time being with themselves, hence
Yeah.
all of the distractions, endless distractions of all kinds. So that when they are confronted with the challenge of life, kind of like what we're going into now or in now, is like it the way out of that is you have to go inside and start to and learn how to be with yourself. And that's very intimidating and scary. That's when all the thoughts and all the emotions and all the things come up. And
Hmm.
so rather than having to face that, then it's easier to look to the outside of all the people changing and situations and whatever and cling to that
Hmm.
because because ultimately you're so afraid of looking at you. And that's exactly where you need to be looking. And I think that's the cocoon phase of all of that. The metaphor is for that time
Yes.
to go inside and learn to be with you, because that's how you get out of it. That's how you find the peace and the confidence and the worth and all of the inner strength to get through anything.
For most people, it's very easy to judge other people,
Mm,
to have opinions about other people, their behavior, their life. But most
yeah,
people cannot look at themselves. But one thing you need to learn is to become comfortable with the discomfort.
yeah,
And I
absolutely.
saw that very clearly in the whole COVID situation, where
Yeah,
all of a sudden everything was closed and you were not allowed to go anywhere and you needed to be by yourself. And I saw so many people in my environment go crazy because they
uh-huh.
can't be by themselves, because then they are confronted with thoughts and feelings that they've spent most of their life running away from.
Yeah, running from. Yeah, and that is the spiritual development because again, just from my own growth of what I have learned through hours of doing meditation and inner work and energy healing, all the things, is that the gift of it's we fear and we judge and we project because we haven't discovered our own selves. And it's the process of being willing to look at the fear of like, why am I so afraid of looking at myself? What have I been taught about who I am that a part of me cannot accept or is afraid of, hence I run from it.
Yes.
Because it's and I there's so much in society that tells us we're worthless, we're cheap, we can't do anything, we're inept, we're stupid, everything to beat us down.
Yes.
And that becomes then what I call the aspect of the ego identity, the false self, because that's not
Mm.
who we truly are. And yet it's been so indoctrinated and that's what we believe. And
Yes.
it's facing that, recognizing that that I think is one of the things that people are so afraid of, because then they have to look at it's like, oh, is this really true about who I am? Am I really that worthless? And if that's not who I am, then who am I?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And
social conditioning, right?
yeah, so that's why it's so important to take the time to go inside and spend the time in the cocoon and be willing to look at that. Stop fighting it. Because what you find on the other side is like, wow, I bought into something that's not who I am. And here I am, as I'm excavating these layers, then I see little glimmers of hope and light, and something's welling up inside of me, and I can't put my finger on it, but I can feel it. And if I cultivate it and nurture it, then that will like reveal to me who I actually am. And it's so much far better than all this garbage that I was taught to believe
Yeah.
about myself.
Yeah.
You know, that's the
Yeah,
gift.
I call them the rules, the bullshit rules of life about how
Yeah.
you're supposed to act, how you're supposed to behave, who you're supposed to be. And we take that as on face value, right? We
Uh-huh.
don't ask, is it true for me?
Yeah.
And maybe it looks different for me. And what you're describing for me is one of the beautiful things of both shadow work, but
Yeah.
also the gene keys. I work a lot with human design and
Mm.
the gene keys, and both with the gene keys and the shadow work, you go and you look at your shadow self, and
Yeah.
when you are not being yourself, when you are being self-destructive, and when you are not trusting in yourself, and you're going to look at those patterns and how they've been playing out in your life, and
Uh-huh.
what triggers those patterns, and what because we are autopilot programmed. And so when something triggers us, then immediately we have certain thoughts and we have certain feelings and we do certain actions. Those are
Mm.
our autopilot programs. And this also happens with these shadow programs. So these shadow patterns. So the more you understand how your shadows work and what they look like, the
Yeah.
better you can recognize them when they're happening. And then the better you can take conscious action to move
Mm-hmm.
away from it. But it requires a willingness, but also a strength to
Yes.
really be brutally honest with yourself and to think, oh my God, this is pretty ugly what I'm doing here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I remember there's times when I was so back in the day when I was going through all my stuff, I had such a victim mentality. Looking back, I was like, oh my God, I'm so buried in it. And when I learned some basic understanding about consciousness and energy and how life works and projection and stuff, it was one of the hardest things for me to do was to look at, okay, something I experienced a conversation and something out in my life that triggered me, and then learn to turn inside. It's like, okay, what was it? What was the energy that I'm carrying that contributed to this thing? What was
Mm.
my part of it? And then to own it. That is the shadow
Yeah.
work. And it's not easy.
No.
And it takes a lot of courage to look at that. And I found, the more I do it, the easier it became. And then I would, and that's where journaling would, and talking with others would come into very beneficial. And then as I learned how to do meditation and energy work, then I'd say, okay, I can identify this theme, this issue, this belief, and then I can do energy work on myself to change that frequency, change that energy within my being. And inevitably, when I would be willing to do that, on the other side is the gift. And that's how strength is cultivated.
Yes.
The personal power, intuition, all the things that we wish for is found on the other side of that shadow. That's where it is sitting,
Yes.
waiting for you to discover.
Yes.
And taking it to the big macro scene of things, as things have come out about the corruption of people and the institutions and things, that is the shadow on the humanity large scale macro.
Yes.
But as we're willing to look at that corruption and name names and see the people and all the things that has been hidden and has been going on for who knows how long amongst humanity, once we can see that and look at it and then accept that that's how life is, and then you find the strength of, this is not what I want, this is not right. And humanity is at that place where they're learning to face the shadow and accept, to discover our personal power by going through that collectively.
Yes,
And
exactly.
it's a big thing. And
Mhm.
when you can see it again, see it on the macro and then take it down to the personal. How am I responding and feeling about this thing? What is it for me and my intimate experience of this big, huge process? But it's the biggest gifts of self-empowerment that I have found have been by going through the shadow.
For sure, yes, and that's why I love the gene keys so much, yeah, because the gene keys, they have three layers.
Yeah,
The bottom layer is the shadow, the middle layer is the gift, and the highest level is called the city, which is who you are when you're your higher self, when you're in your highest
yeah,
vibration. And the way from the shadow to your highest vibration is by way of the gift. So it
yeah.
shows you all aspects of yourself. And for me, it has answered every single question I've ever had
Mhm.
about myself, about my life, about my experiences, but also about my business. And
Yeah,
it's really all the answers are within ourselves, right? But
yeah.
most of us go looking for them outside of ourselves. Another course, another coach, another healer. And I've done the same
Mhm.
because I thought that that would be the answer to my problems or the solution to my issues. And it wasn't until I really went deep within myself, I
Yeah,
discovered that everything that I needed to know was already in myself. I just needed
yeah.
an interpreter.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember I mean, the way I see it is like we have the right and left brain hemispheres, the analytical, the intuitive. It's important to cultivate and educate both.
Yes.
Yes, there's the aspect of ourselves, our left brain, where we do need to understand the concepts of this, the that, the techniques and everything, because that's what helps us navigate the world and provide structure and boundaries and all the things.
Yes.
And our Western society, I think, has gotten very good at that, to the point where it has
Yes.
created an imbalance, because now
Yeah.
cultivating and understanding the right brain aspect of ourself is almost foreign.
Yeah.
And that's, we've got to have that balance to be a whole person, to
Yeah.
be able to have that fluidity of knowing when to express what part of ourselves.
Yes.
And I one of how I have been able to go through and heal so much for me is learning how to do meditation and energy work. And
Hmm.
there's so many experiences I have when I first learned to surrender, quieted the mind and all the questions and the how-tos to be able to just get into a deep state of meditation, having an intention of the meditation of like, okay, this issue, this pattern, this belief, it needs to be resolved. But there were so many times in deep in meditation and just open-minded and allowing and just being there, getting into the space where information can start to stream into my conscious mind. That is the gift, I think, of so much of this inner work. Is that's how you connect with your higher self, your spiritual self, your divine knowing, and just be able to allow that information to come through you. So that, for me, I could understand, see the big picture of like, oh, that's why I did X and X. This is how that pattern played out in my life. And I can see the big picture. Now I understand why I chose what I did.
Yes.
It's that, to me, is what has provided peace. To
Yes.
finally quiet the mind, to understand the whys and the wheres and the how fors, is to get to that deep place of meditation, so your inner self can instruct you as to why and what was the purpose.
Hmm.
That is self-knowing in a way that you can't put a price on that.
No. And we've been talking about the benefits of overcoming your struggles and your challenges and
Yeah,
flowing towards being yourself. And this is, I think, the biggest one, right? Where you're starting to find this inner peace, where the outside world is no longer rocking your boat, or maybe
yeah,
it's a little wiggle, and then you think,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And but before they could capsize your boat, they could drill holes in your boat, they could sink it with a not even maybe intended mark. There
Yeah.
was not a lot that needed to happen in order for you to have heavy storms and a capsizing boat and feel like you were drowning. And
Yeah.
nowadays, when you really get to know yourself, the bad, the good, the ugly, everything,
Everything. Yeah.
right? Then you know exactly who you are, and
Yeah.
you know also exactly what your patterns are, what your triggers are, and you've worked through them. You've done the healing that needs to happen,
Mhm.
you've done the deconditioning that needs to happen, you've done the shadow work that needs to happen, you've done the inner child healing that needs to happen, the energy
Yeah.
work that needs to happen, and you've reached a point where you think, well, I still don't have all the answers because I don't think you'll ever be done learning.
No.
But at
Yeah.
least now, I feel at peace.
Yeah. And that's something that I've the last few months that I've really found a deeper layer, I guess if you want to call it that, of
Mhm.
that stillness and calm and peace. And I just relish it. It's like, oh, this feels so good. After all of the work, this is like my reward in some ways for all of the work that you're just describing.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. And just to have the stillness, knowing that, everything is going crazy and people are going off and doing their things, but just to have the stillness. And a couple things with that is in that stillness, then you've learned through all of the work to be able to recognize the intuitive hunches, to understand when your inner self is talking, to be able to guide and steer you, to know what feels right, what feels wrong, what is your next step. And that, I think, is what so many people are desperately searching for. It's like all
Mhm.
the unknown is like the answers literally are within to tell you, go here, do this, create that, blah, blah.
Mhm.
And how you've got to go through the work to cultivate that communication with yourself, to
Yes.
open that channel. And
Yes.
so that you can know, it's like, oh, let's go over here and do this. And this is the solution of what I was asking for. This is how I get through the muck. And, and then secondly, being in the state of finding that calm and stillness and that contentment, the way I see it is that I be that. I'm a
Mhm.
pillar of that frequency, that energy is kind of grounded and connected into the earth. And simply being me, being who I am, that peace and calm and stillness automatically gets broadcast out to who knows how far, to be able to have some type of effect, whether it's minute, who knows, but adding that frequency of peace and stillness into the soup, into the chaos, it does help calm it down. And so you are having an effect on people, even kind of like in a not really a roundabout way, but a very subtle way of how you contribute to uplifting and helping the situation.
Yes. Yes, you're absolutely right. You need to find that stillness, that quiet within, in
Yeah.
order to recognize your body's signals. Because all of us, we have this woo yes feeling
Yeah.
in our belly, right? When things are
Yeah.
right for you, or when you are moving in the right direction, or when you choose something that's right for you, it feels
Yeah.
exciting. It feels like ooh. But we
Yeah.
all
You recognize it. You know that feeling.
ah, feeling, right? When you think,
Yeah.
oh, no, and that's your intuition. That's what it feels
Yes.
like within yourself. But when you are too busy in your mind and you're like everywhere, right? You don't feel it or you don't
Yeah.
recognize it or a combination of it. And then you are lost because you have no idea what to choose because you cannot tune in to your inner knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, bringing that into the pure physical level of our body and how we're made is that ability to sense. That is an innate, natural function of our nervous system. I think people have, for whatever, they've made intuition so weird and woo-woo, and you're like, ooh. It's like, no, it's a basic function of how you are wired and built. It's how your
Yes,
nervous system is supposed to be working,
yes.
and so when we learn how to meditate, deal with all of our mental, emotional things, when we clean up the diet, get the heavy metals and all the chemicals and everything out of our system, it's like and cleansing and detoxing everything. It's like cleaning off a smoky mirror so that our natural nervous system can fire and function the way it's supposed to send the signals across, all of our body so that we can receive and interpret them. That's how we're supposed to be working and functioning.
Yes.
And so it's, it's like it's the whole person. It's developing all of us. We're not just the body, we're not just the mind, we're not just the emotions. We address all of that, and it learns to all work together synergistically, so that when you have a clean, healthy body, your mind and emotions naturally quiet down.
Yes.
And you can pick up those signals from your environment, and sense what your nervous system is telling you much easier.
Exactly. You say you call it the right and the left brain, and of course we have a right brain sphere and a left brain sphere. But it's also well, everything is about balance. So you can
Yeah.
also call it the masculine and the feminine,
Yes. Yeah.
and balancing everything. So of course you need to have a logic, but you also need to have intuition. Of course you need to have science, but you also need to have woo. For me, they are
Yeah.
two sides of the same coin, and
Exactly.
both need to be there equally so that you can have a balance. And it's not always like this. It can do a little bit like this, and it can be like this. So it can move, but it's always trying to find the best possible balance in any given moment. And when that happens, then you tap into naturalness,
Yeah.
ease,
Uh-huh.
flow.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like each person is going to have their own percentage, if you want to call it that, of masculine and feminine. So their balance is, and so, you have yours, I have mine, we have each other. And so together that creates its own little orchestra and a dynamic of how we work. But it is so important. And I think that's, again, another thing that as humanity, all of the things that people are going through today is to learn that lesson too, because, we can see, in extreme corruption, it's like the logical mind going off so far that it
Mm.
self-destructs and takes everyone with it, goes off the cliff, because there's not the checks and balances of the morality, the consciousness, the intuitive thing of like, oh, you've gone too far, this is not correct. And yet you can go the other side, the other extreme, where you're, wanting to float all in clouds and glitters and rainbows and unicorns, and when you're never even on the ground, never even
Yeah,
focused in earth, having an experience of life.
I know enough people
It's
like that
both.
too.
Yeah, it's both. It's
Yes.
integrating both. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and what I also often teach people, especially highly sensitive people, empath people, people who are more sensitive, for a long time, we've sort of acted like a doormat, and we've allowed
Mhm.
people to walk all over us. And we might have had all these feelings about it, but we bottled it up. We kept it in and we didn't express it. And then when you
Yeah.
start getting to know yourself and start learning about boundaries and saying no and healing, then you could experience a period where you're like, fuck off. You're
Absolutely.
really strong in your boundary setting, right? Where before
Yeah.
you didn't say anything, then you can even become quite aggressive. And I said,
Yeah.
well, this is a normal process because you've
Yeah.
explored this side where you were very easygoing and docile to the
Yeah.
extreme. And then you go to the complete other side because you need to know both sides really well in
Yeah.
order to find that balance in the middle.
Yeah. And it's for me, it's like it's exploring and developing both masculine consciousness and feminine consciousness, and recognizing that we have both. We are constructed of both.
Yes.
So like learning to stand up for yourself, learning to come, for me, learning to come out of victim consciousness, to be able to set the boundaries, say, this is my truth, and be able to open my mouth and to speak and to say no. That is a development of our masculine consciousness within ourselves.
Yes.
And, there is a lot of people that have especially I think women and culturation and all the things, have a very difficult time because we've been taught that that's just wrong. And it's,
Mhm.
that there's a time when I lived in California for a few years, and I look at that phase of my life as my chapter of learning to heal my relationship with the masculine. The masculine, not particular people or men. And
Yeah.
yes, and during that time, there were men in my life who were, I looked at them as like catalysts or teachers, or what can I learn from these interactions to help me heal my relationship with the masculine. And that took me down many roads. And but it was so beneficial because that really provided me with a sense of strength and structure and confidence and all the things that I had not had before then. So it's so important. I kind of look at it as, if you look at it like straight anatomy of when you look at the hips, it's the hip bones, the pelvic bowl, the bones, they're very solid. They're very strong. They're very tightly together. And it's critical that our pelvis is stable and strong, because that within that, and that's like the masculine, this protection, the structure, the stability, within that are these delicate organs and tissues of the intestines and the reproductive parts, our ability to create, which is very feminine. Yeah. You cannot generate life, whether it's a baby or a business or partnership, anything. You have to have both of those structures in place to generate life. And we contain both. Hence, it's important to cultivate and nurture and develop both.
Yes. Yeah, and it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. Men and women have both male and female energy within each of us. And it's a matter of balancing it. And what I see for the sensitive men, the highly sensitive men, the empath men, is that they often are also struggling with the very masculine, male-dominated world where you need to talk about beer and football and cars and boobs.
Yeah.
And, the really alpha male, and they don't identify as that. And for women, I see that especially when they start working in what was before a male-dominated environment, they wear pantsuits and short hair and also become very male-dominated.
Yeah, very masculine. Yeah, both of them have gone to this extreme. And I think the way that I've learned to work through that stuff for me is so much of that is very old indoctrination, social culturation, indoctrination of what a man is, what a woman is, to the point where it's so, muddled at this point. But it's, I would say for both those, the women's in the men and those polarities, I'll just, like for the men, you were saying. So I would say a suggestion for men, it would be to look at the masculine enculturation, take the good, the bad, the ugly. And how I think one of the biggest turnoffs in our society about toxic masculinity is, again, how that has gone to such an extreme that has become so corrupt that it's threatening to blow up the planet and take everyone with us. Bringing it back to balance again. But what have we been taught about what patriarchy is? Is that really a true divine expression of masculine consciousness? And again, that goes back, who are you? This is the inner work again. That's where you find those answers. But it's understanding what true masculine energy really is and how it expresses. And then, to be able to step into that and say, I can claim this. This resonates with me. The extreme of that, maybe not so much, and that's okay. But for me, this is my definition of what divine masculine is. And if along the way, then, the individual finds that they need to strengthen that, to strengthen the bones in the pelvic bowl so it can hold the organs more better. That's good English, but you know what I mean. But is there some tweaking and strengthening, nurturing that is being asked for, so that the pelvic bowl bones are so strong and solid and healthy that it can support you in moving through your life. And I think a lot of the trigger of the toxic masculinity, patriarchy, all that stuff, again, it's the shadow of, like, what are you denying within yourself?
Yes.
Due to all the enculturation that you haven't discovered about your own expression of what healthy divine masculinity is. And then the same would go for the feminine.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I've been loving our talk, Loralee. I think we hit some really important points. And if you are watching and listening and you've made it to the time where we are now in our talk, then thank you. And I would love it if you could maybe share in the comments either your biggest takeaway from what Loralee and me talked about today, or maybe you want to share your story, or maybe you have a question. Please feel free to put it in the comments, and I'll make sure that if it's a question, we will answer it or respond to anything that you're willing to leave for us. That will be awesome. And I can also imagine that you think, well, I love Loralee and I love her energy and I would just really like to connect with her. So where can people find you, Loralee?
So you can find me at livingwellwithloralee.com. And that explains, what I'm doing, my services and things that I offer to support people, both with energy healing, body work for those who are local here, as well as some health coaching for digestive health. And on that page, also, you'll find a couple of gifts that your audience can download if they choose and would like to know. One I would recommend, based upon our conversation today, is one called What It Takes to Heal Yourself.
Mhm.
4 areas of yourself to really address. So that can be found on my webpage, livingwellwithloralee.com.
I love it. I will make sure that the link Loralee just mentioned is included in the show notes. So you'll probably find it below the video or maybe to the sides. It kind of depends on where you're catching this, but it will surely be somewhere around the video. So take her up on her offer, go to her website, check out what she is offering, and download this free giveaway because it sounds awesome. And I want to thank you for being a guest on my show, Loralee. I've really, really enjoyed our talk.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine the impact it will have on everybody that's listening. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
I
Yeah.
loved it. Also,
Yeah.
thank you, listener, viewer, watcher out there for your support for this channel. If you're new here, it would be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel, maybe hit the notification bell so you will never miss another video again. And I wish you an amazing rest of your day, and I look forward to inspiring you with another beautiful guest in next week's talk. For today, have an amazing rest of your day and talk again soon.